Yo, what is going on, APUSH people? We are back with Key Concept 6.3. This is the final one in Period 6, which spans from 1865 to 1898. I am here to cover everything you need to know about Key Concept 6.3. And as always, if you want to download this PowerPoint or a fill-in-the-blanks guide to go along with this, please click the description, the link below, and it will take you on over to APUSHreview.com. Before we begin, it's shout-out time. I want to give a huge shout out to Mr. Carr and his class. Thank you guys so much for watching my videos. I hope they're helpful for you this year, and I hope they're helpful for anybody watching this. But I appreciate your support, Mr. Carr, and your class. Good luck in May. All right, let's start off with the new curriculum. Key Concept 6.3 states the following: the Gilded Age witnessed new cultural and intellectual movements in tandem or in conjunction with political debates over economic and social policies. And this is from page 63 of the curriculum framework. If you want to take a look at it, follow the description, the link below to see that. So some big idea questions you should think about as we go through it forward in this video. Why did more citizens call for increased control of the government? What were different examples of discrimination that various groups faced in the late 19th century? And how did business leaders and the wealthy justify their wealth? All right, let's take a look a little deeper here into Key Concept 6.1. Roman numeral 1 states Gilded Age politics were intimately tied to big business and focused nationally on economic issues, tariffs, currency, corporate expansion, and laissez-faire economic policy that engendered numerous calls for reform. So letter A states that government corruption encouraged the public to demand more control. Sometimes it was minor or small, and sometimes there were major changes to the capitalist system. So let's look at some examples. And these reforms affected all levels of government, whether it was local, municipal, or city government, state governments, and the national or the federal government. So some examples: the referendum. This becomes popular during the Progressive era in period 7 that we'll talk about, especially in Wisconsin. And this allows citizens to vote on laws. So when you go to vote for candidates in election year, with a referendum, citizens could actually vote yes or no to laws. They're sometimes called propositions as well. The Interstate Commerce Act was created during this time, and this was one of the first regulatory agencies in U.S. history, and this was created specifically to regulate railroads, and this was more symbolic at first. This did require railroads to publish their rates. So this is the beginning of the government starting to regulate certain businesses and industries. And this is something that farmers really called for, regulating the railroad industry. Let's jump on over to letter B. Racism, nativism, and Supreme Court decisions, specifically Plessy versus Ferguson, were used to justify violence, discrimination, and segregation. So let's take a look at some examples. We have the American Protective Association, or the APA. This was very similar to the Know Nothing Party of the 1850s. So what do you think, without me telling you anything, what was the American Protective Association? What were their goals then? Yeah, you know it. It's anti-immigrants, because the Know Nothing Party was anti-immigrant. This is an example of nativism, and they wanted to ban Catholics from holding office and halt immigration. For a multiple choice question, you could perhaps see a platform of the APA, or maybe you would see, an excerpt about the Know Nothing Party, and then be able to compare these two and realize that they had similar goals. The Chinese Exclusion Act was passed in 1883, and here we see Chinese working on railroads, and really out west, many Chinese helped build the Transcontinental Railroad. And what this does from 1883 forward, for quite a while, this prohibited Chinese immigration. So this was specifically aimed at one group of people. This is an example of nativism. Here's a political cartoon, a very popular political cartoon. Perhaps it could be a prompt for a multiple choice question or a short answer. Now, what do we notice? Well, we see this Chinese guy sitting in front of the Golden Gate of Liberty, and he wants to bring with him industry, order, peace, and sobriety. And on the brick wall here it says, notice, communists, nihilists, socialists, and a bunch of others are welcome, but no admittance to China men. So this is specifically against the Chinese. And this is an example of nativism, or hatred or distrust and dislike of foreigners. Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, one of the most famous court cases ever. I do have a video on that. Check the description below. This upheld the constitutionality of Jim Crow laws. In other words, it allowed for segregation. And the Supreme Court justified this in an 8-1 decision by using the phrase separate but equal. separate facilities were okay as long as they were equal. And in reality, they never were equal. All right, key concept 6.3, Roman numeral 2, new cultural and intellectual movements both buttressed or supported and challenged the social order of the Gilded Age. So let's talk about letter A here, some arguments that were used to justify the success of the wealthy. Well, we have social Darwinism, and this is the idea of survival of the fittest. Remember, Charles Darwin did not coin social Darwinism or survival of the fittest. Other people did, most notably this dude, Herbert Spencer. Now, I have a question for you. Are these the best sideburns ever? Take a look at this picture. I don't even know if those are sideburns or if that's a neck beard connected under there. You can see his chin, so it's not a true beard. I don't know, I'm going those are the nicest mutton chops you will ever see. So the argument of social Darwinism is that any business could use any tactic necessary to prosper. So when Rockefeller would sell his oil really cheap, actually below production in order to help put his competitors out of business, that would be justified under social Darwinism. Another thing not mentioned by the curriculum, but something that was used to justify this, are Horatio Alger books. And he wrote books about hard work brings success. He wrote rags to riches stories. And one of his most famous ones was about James Garfield, who was born very poor, who was a canal boy, and then became president of the United States. Some advocated that the wealthy were obligated to help the less fortunate. And this is where we have an idea of the gospel. While very important to know this idea, it was by Andrew Carnegie. And this was a writing that he produced, and this advocated philanthropy, or the idea of giving money away. And he argued that it was the duty of the wealthy to donate money to help out with economic inequality. And he actually gave a lot of his money away to build things like libraries. There are over 1,000 libraries in this country right now that began as a result of Andrew Carnegie giving his money away. Finally, last part of 6.3 Roman numeral 2, there are many people challenged corporate ethic and capitalism and offered alternate visions of good society through, well, we have the social gospel. Very, very important. Specifically mentioned, star this, circle it, underline it, highlight it, draw some bells, whistles, arrows, whatever you have to do to this bad boy to remember it. This was a Protestant church movement that sought to end social injustice. Please do not confuse the social gospel with the gospel of wealth. The social gospel is all about a church movement to make society better. And they focused on poverty and economic inequality. So it was a way to improve society through religion. Very important to know that. Now, women and African Americans challenged their place in society politically, socially, and economically, and they did so in the following ways. Well, we have Booker T. Washington, who I've talked about in a previous video, and I do have a video on him and W.E.B. Du Bois, and there's Booker T. He advocated vocational training for blacks, and he argued for economic equality for African Americans. Ida B. Wells-Barnett, one of the most courageous individuals, I think, of the late 19th century, black woman, and she investigated lynching, and she was a journalist, and she was a very outspoken critic of lynching, and she advocated a federal anti-lynching law. So she spent lots of time studying lynching in the South and the horrific effects of it, and she pushed for the federal government to pass an anti-lynching law. Finally, we have Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was a leading suffragist and also was an advocate of interracial marriage. So if you look at the ideas of these three individuals, they were very progressive for their time and very ahead, and they helped challenge cultural norms of the time, especially in the South. So let's just look at Elizabeth Cady Stanton. During that time, we had segregation, which was legally upheld through Plessy versus Ferguson, and she's advocating interracial marriage. So that is absolutely a challenge to norms in society at that time. Be familiar with all three of these people, please. All right, let's finish up with some test tips, multiple choice and short answer questions. Plessy versus Ferguson, know it, know all the details of it, know the impacts of it. Examples of discrimination, whether it's the APA or the Chinese Exclusion Act. I think you could absolutely see an excerpt or a political cartoon or some sort of document about either the APA or the Chinese Exclusion Act. For essay questions, you could see comparing forms of discrimination with other time periods, looking at things like the experiences of old immigrants before the Civil War and new immigrants during this time period. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching 6.3. We are now completely done with period 6. We only have 3 more periods to go, and I look forward to seeing you right back here for period 7. And I appreciate you watching. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to leave them in the section below. And make sure you check out all the related videos in the description to help you out with this new curriculum. I appreciate you watching. Thank you very much and have a good day.